All right. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All right. Let's continue our debate on did the early church fathers believe in the Trinity? That's right. We'll continue on. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, my brother. Hope you enjoy this. Yeah. Take your time, brother. Take your time. So we'll continue our talking about Justin Martyr, and he believed in what the Trinity, as we call it now, one of the early church fathers on there, and see a heretic now. Which, yes, vast majority of our church fathers are in fact heretics now because of how much they have changed everything they have to do with the Trinity and kind of make it work. Get my coffee. So let's set this up. All right. So you know what? I'm gonna wait for my brother here. Yes, Junie is smart. I shall wait. I'll wait. My dear for to be online, so I'll do the same. Hope everybody's getting something out of this. On it, been quite good past couple days. On the lives, a lot of back and forth. A lot of people joining the chat. So I'll get some of that as well today. Inshallah, of course. All right, so let's see.
All things. Well, hold on, check this out. If the Son himself is the maker of all things, how can he be another God subject to him? If it means another person in the Godhead, how can he be the subject to the maker of all things if he is the maker of all things himself?
Mm-hmm.
So even in the context of this passage alone, it doesn't make sense. So I know Trinitarians want to give this gloss or explanation. Oh, another God means another divine person. Well, he doesn't say that, but they want to project that on him. Nevertheless, not only from this passage, you will see from further passages why that cannot possibly be the case, because we're going to address the issue yet again that he believes the Son is a temporal contingent product of the Father's will. And when you add that together with this and many other statements, you see that you cannot interpret him in that context. So, yeah, I think that's clear enough here. We can move on to the next passage here. Oh, and just quickly, you saw how it mentioned in that text that he's called an angel, and he says he's called an angel because he announces to men whomsoever the God who is above all things, and he says above whom there is no other God, meaning there is no other God above the maker of all things, but there is another God below the maker of all things. And this goes back to you when you asked why is he calling him an angel, and that's in reference to that, because Justin believes, and as you'll see here, his argument is that all of these supposed appearances of quote unquote God or the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, they're actually a pre-existent Christ or Son figure, and they're not actually the Father. And the reason why he says that is also going to be important to why you know that he can't be just saying, oh, it's another divine person, same God. Now, he says later on in chapter 56, this is now Trypho's response. So look, again, to show that he understands what he's saying. Do you think that God appeared? Oh, no, this is Justin, sorry, to Trypho. Do you think that God appeared to Abraham under the oak in Mamre, as the scripture asserts? So now Justin is asking, look, who do you think appeared to Abraham? Trypho says, assuredly, yeah, definitely. Justin says, in response, reverting to the scriptures, I shall endeavor to persuade you. Again, he mentions it, that he who is said to have appeared to Abraham and to Jacob and to Moses, and who is called God, is distinct from him who made all things. Numerically, I mean, not distinct in will. For I affirm that he has never at any time done anything which he would made the world, above whom there is no other God, has not wished him both to do and to engage himself with. So now what he's saying again here, repeating in the same chapter, who do you think is that figure? Do you believe it's God? Oh, you do? Okay. Well, I'm going to persuade you.
All right, Miss. Right, Judy. Thank you for stopping by. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And may Allah protect you.
It's not God. If he actually believed that it was the same one and only God, he would say, okay, Trifle, you're right. He said, no, he is called God, but is distinct from him who made all things. Again, according to Trinitarianism, the Son made all things. If he made all things, how could he be distinct from him who made all things? And he says numerically distinct. And then he says, but not in will. So the Trinitarian may say, oh, hold on. The door creaked open. That means they all share the same will, right? No, he goes on to explain what he means by that. He doesn't mean that they have one numerical will. He just means that the Son is carrying out the commands of the Father, and whatever he orders to him to do, he does it faithfully, and he's carrying out his commands. Okay? So this is very clear. Now, let me go on here to, this is what I would call the backbreaker. Okay, this text here is just, I mean, I don't understand how somebody could interpret it another way. Again, it's not one time, it's not two times. We're getting a trinity of times here of there's another God besides the maker of all things. We could have said, hold on, his pen slipped. Maybe, somebody manipulated the text. No, there's too many times. Now, chapter 60, a little bit later, Justin says, so notice I'm going in order here. Justin in chapter 60 says, as has already been proven to you by the passages previously quoted, it will not be the creator of all things that is the God that said to Moses that he was the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob, but it will be who has been proven to you to have appeared to Abraham, ministering to the will of the maker of all things, and likewise carrying into execution his counsel in the judgment of Sodom, so that even though it be as you say, that there were two, an angel and God, he who has but the smallest intelligence will not venture to assert that the maker and father of all things, having left all supercelestial matters, was visible on a little portion of earth. Now, I'm saying, how can you read this and possibly come to a different conclusion? Now, let's break this down. He says, look, I already proved to you, I already quoted it to you, but you're making me do it again. I got to tell you again.
So this is Trifo responding to Justin.
No, this is Justin saying
responding to Trifo.
Yeah, this is Justin responding to Trifo saying, look, I already proved it to you by the previous passages I quoted. It will not be the creator of all things that is as God that said to Moses. Well, hold on a second. Isn't Jesus or the Son or the Word the same God as the Father? Isn't he the creator of all things? How can he not only says so he says it two ways. Notice a slight difference. Before he said it's another God besides the maker of all things. Now he says, just in case you didn't understand, let me say it to you differently. It will not be the creator of all things. So if the Son is the creator of all things, then we can only say that Trifo is engaged in some kind of confusion or double talk here. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. He's saying it's not the creator of all things who appeared to Abraham and Jacob and Moses and so on and so forth. And then he says, so notice Justin consistently uses the maker of all things, creator of all things for the Father and God. He equates them. But the Son is always something different. Another God besides the maker of all things. See? Now look. Then he says, hold on a second. Any of you Christians that are confused, just in case you're confused, let's clear this up. He who has but the smallest intelligence will not venture to assert that the maker and father of all things having left all super celestial matters, was visible on a little portion of the earth. What is he saying? He said, look, Mr. Christian, not even a person with the smallest intelligence. Now, I'm not saying this to talk down to Christians. I'm just trying to say what Justin is saying here. Not even a person with the smallest intelligence would say that this was the Father that did it. Now, why is he saying that? Because Justin had of course, because he was coming from a Platonic background, he had an understanding of this hierarchy of being, where the Most High God, has these intermediaries by which he then creates and arranges the world. And
yeah, that was a very popular belief back then. I mean, it even says right there, having left all super celestial matters. Yeah, God's just not going to leave heaven to come down to this little portion of the earth. Which I said many times on it, they believe that Jesus at the most was a type of God, but definitely not in the realm of the God. If that makes sense.
So on and so forth. But the Most High God is distant. He cannot directly interact with creation, and therefore he cannot become incarnate. So how can he say he was visible on a little portion of earth? Now, this also goes back to the question of what Thomas Aquinas said. Well, if they have the same power, then if the Son became incarnate, the Father must have the ability to become incarnate too. So he says they don't have the same Justin's position results in them not having the same power, which according to Cyril is polytheism. Okay, so I mean, I hope that is clear to the audience. Now again, now we get Trypho's response, okay, in chapter 60. Trypho, we shall perceive that the God who communed with Moses from the bush was not the maker of all things. So again, Justin is representing Trypho, is understanding him in the exact same way that we are. Trypho understands him as saying, all right, I got you, mate. And that's why some scholars think this is not a genuine even conversation, because Justin represents Trypho as kind of agreeing with him at some point after he gives his evidence. Yeah, we shall perceive that the God who communed with Moses from the bush was not the maker of all things. So now Trypho is saying, okay, I agree with you. But he who has been shown to have manifested himself to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, who was also called and is perceived to be the angel of God, the maker of all things, because he publishes to men the commands of the Father and maker of all things. Again, notice the distinction between the maker of all things and this other God. The maker of all things did not appear, and now Trypho's agreeing. The poor guy, I mean, I don't know if he actually did, but he's agreeing at this point. Now, okay, so Trypho's understanding him. Now we're getting to chapter 61 here. Okay, so he says now, this is from Justin. I shall give you another testimony, my friends, from the scriptures, that God begot before all creatures a beginning.
Well, alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Your live stream was amazing. You're doing some great work. Thank you for having that shit that was able to answer my questions. And inshallah, I should be doing a video about the rabbi on the live on it. It was very interesting. Have a lot of things that I want to do.
Who was a certain rational power, again, notice a power after God, proceeding from himself, who was called by the Holy Spirit, now the glory of the Lord, now the Son, again wisdom, again an angel, then God, and then Lord and Logos. And on another occasion, he calls himself captain, when he appeared in human form to Joshua, the son of Nun. For he can be called by all those names, since he ministers to the Father's will, and since he was begotten of the Father by an act of will. So why is he God? Why is he angel? Why is he son? Why is he all these titles? There's no confusion. He tells you, whether you agree with it or not, he gets all of these titles because he was begot. He ministers to the Father's will. So he's like his messenger. He does whatever he tells him. And since he was begotten of the Father by an act of will, the word of wisdom, who is himself this God, begotten of the Father of all things, and word and wisdom and power, and the glory of the begetter, will bear evidence to me. when he speaks by Solomon the following: if I shall declare to you what happens daily, I shall call to mind events from everlasting and review them. The Lord made me the beginning of his ways for his works. Now, this is these personification texts in Proverbs that speak about wisdom in a sort of almost semi-personalized manner. And just to note to the audience, Proverbs 8 was a battleground text between the so-called Orthodox or Proto-Orthodox and the Arians, or those that believed in subordinationism, because they used Proverbs, which sometimes Jesus is, as he mentions here, he's called wisdom, Justin says. Those texts mention in Proverbs chapter 8 that wisdom is created. So when they say that Jesus is the wisdom of God, and that text says wisdom is created, then that means Jesus is a created being, right? And that's why many Orthodox, like Athanasius, and we'll see in just a second, he says, no, Proverbs 8 can't be about his pre-existence when wisdom was created. That must be about the incarnation. And therefore, we can make sense of how we can say that that word created is being applied there. So just
It's just, man, I can only imagine how hard this was back then, because now it's so confusing now as a theology. Back then, so many conflicting, so many views on it. So like you could see the creation of this pagan belief, how it's slowly manifesting away from just worship God and God alone. That's it. And they have to slowly reconstruct the entirety of everything. Yeah, Jake is definitely very good. He's very knowledgeable and read, and I like how he breaks everything down on there. So this has been extremely and very eye-opening, to say the least, on there.
Justin references Proverbs 8:22-23, where it says that wisdom was created at the beginning of God's works. He was begotten of the Father by an act of will. Why does he have all these titles? Because he ministers to the will of the Father, and he's begotten of an act of the Father's will. Now, again, in this same text here, footnote number 1, page 244, the author says, and I quote, Marin, speaking about another scholar, notes that Justin does not allude to the eternal generation of the Son, but to that by which the Father is said to have generated him, the Son, as the beginning of all creatures. So again, these scholars are interpreting the text in exactly the same way. He doesn't believe in eternal generation. Yes, he believes that the Son is begotten of the Father, but not by his essence, by his will, not eternally, but temporally and contingently. Okay, so this is a very important text. That's why I said in this discussion with Dyer, hey,
yeah, this kind of just destroys how so many say that the Trinity came about and everything. On that's heresy 101 right there. That would be heretical. That would be thrown out. You thrown out of church. If you actually think of Jesus not being an eternal creation. Yes. Yeah, mine, alhamdulillah, yeah, definitely prayer. I don't have mine for another 2 hours. It's a different time, but yes, alhamdulillah. Make dua for me, my family, and for all the people in Palestine, of course. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's continue on.
hey, if he's begotten of the Father's will, is this heresy? And he said, yeah, it can be understood as heretical. So now, just to show you what's the Orthodox side saying. Proverbs 8 about the Son's generation before the incarnation, question mark. So this is what Athanasius says. For those who don't know, Athanasius is in the 4th century. He's part of the Council of Nicaea. He's Orthodox, supposed to be Trinitarian. He has a book against the Arians because his battle was with the Arians at that time, those who subordinated the divinity of the Son, who believed he was divine or God in some sense, but not co-equal, co-eternal of the Father. So this is from Against the Arians, book 2. He says that Proverbs 8:22 does not refer to eternal generation, but to the incarnation. He says, for in this passage, not as signifying the essence of his Godhead, nor his own everlasting and genuine generation from the Father, has the word spoken by Solomon, but on the other hand, his manhood and economy towards us. That's not how Justin interpreted it. Justin interpreted that as referring to him being begotten of the will of the Father in some pre-existent realm. Okay? Now look what he says, Athanasius says about people who disagree with him and say that this is about, other than the manhood, that it's actually about his divinity being begotten at a certain point in time and therefore created. He says this, I did indeed think that enough had been said already against the hollow professors of Arius's madness, whether for their refutation or in the truth's behalf, to ensure a cessation and repentance of their evil thoughts and words about the Savior. They, however, for whatever reason, still do not succumb, but as swine and dogs wallow in their own vomit and their own mire, rather invent new expedients for their irreligion. Now, I'm going to go to the next slide, but I mean, he's not holding any punches here. I mean, so he's giving you straight out the barrel. And then he says, thus, they understood, speaking about those people who are dogs and pigs in their own vomit, they misunderstood the passage in the Proverbs, the Lord has created me a beginning of his ways for his works, and the words of the apostle who was faithful to him that made him, Hebrews 3:2, and straightway argue that the Son is a work and a creature. So I represented the debate accurately how they use this text. He says, let us proceed afresh to take up the question of the sense of these, to remind the faithful and to show from each of these passages that they have no knowledge at all of Christianity. So somebody who believes that has no knowledge of Christianity is a dog and a pig in his own vomit. I mean, sorry, but Justin Martyr believed that. Were it otherwise, they would not have shut themselves up in unbelief of the present Jews. So he's accusing them of kufr, basically, for believing it.
And we see how they believe, like Christianity keeps on believing acting this way on. If you don't believe in my own version of it, then I think that's kind of, it's almost like built into the religion.
Yes. Now he says, yeah, so that's the ending section there. Now, the whole point is to assert that this Proverbs 8 is about the pre-existent divinity on which the Son was begotten, and to understand it that way, that wisdom was created and therefore the Son is created, which is how Justin understands it. He's saying this is basically kufr. You must understand it because just for Athanasius, the Son is not a created being. Therefore, he exegetes it as must be referring to his incarnation, being created in the womb of Mary. Okay. So this is to show that I'm not just saying it's problematic from the Orthodox. They're telling you right here. Athanasius is telling you that. Now, Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 85. He says, and I quote, who is the Lord of hosts by the Son of the Father, who conferred on him the dignity, this very Son of God, who is the firstborn of every creature. Well, if he's not a creature, how's he the firstborn of every creature? Again, he's using the title. He doesn't have a problem in certain contexts referring to him as a creature. Again, Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 86. Therefore, God, even your God, has anointed you with oil, the oil of gladness above your fellows. For indeed, all kings and anointed persons obtain from him their share in the names of kings and anointed, just as he himself received from the Father the titles of king and Christ and priest and angel and such like other titles which he bears or did bear. So this is a text from the Psalms about where it said, God, even your God, And I think it's also mentioned again in Hebrews in the New Testament. And what Justin is saying here, again, reiterating all of these titles, king, Christ, priest, angel, all of them they're inherited from the Father, meaning he doesn't have them in and of himself. Okay. Now, here in chapter 102, this is a really interesting text here, actually. I quite like this one. He says, "For if the Son of God evidently states that he can be saved, neither because he is a son, nor because he is strong or wise, but that without God he cannot be saved, even though he be sinless. As Isaiah declares in words to the effect that even in regard to his very language, he committed no sin, for he committed no iniquity or guile with his mouth. How do you suppose, you or others who expect to be saved without this hope, suppose that you are not deceiving yourselves?" So what is he saying here? He's saying, look, even the Son of God doesn't think that because he's the Son of God, because he's strong and because he's wise, and because he's sinless, that he just doesn't need to be saved. So even the sinless Son of God needs to be saved.
That is wow. So yeah, so I mean, definitely not God or not co-equal to God. So it's more akin to like a Hercules type or Jupiter, where Zeus still has to quote grant them Olympus. You know, he still has the overarching that he makes a decision on it. So even Jesus is almost akin to the same view where he still needs to be saved and he needs permission from the Father for anything and everything, even though he's supposed to be co-equal on the now Trinity. But before that, that's not how the view was. Even though he's sinless, or something that is completely without sin still cannot be saved, which I thought being sinless meant that you were saved, but not. It's just, yeah, it's that. Yeah, that's it's completely heretical, really. This person will be thrown out of the church.
Well, does God need to be saved? Last time I checked, not. So I wouldn't understand this in any other way as a subordinationist text where Justin is saying, even though he's sinless, right? Can't be referring to his divinity because as divine, it's impossible for him to commit sin. So that doesn't make any sense. So even though he's a human, even though he's a created being that is sinless, he still requires to be saved. Okay? You can't say this about God. This is not Trinitarian text. Okay, so now here's where we get back to this issue of being begotten by the Father's will and everything. So, chapter 125. Accordingly, the name Israel signifies this: a man who overcomes power. For Isra is a man overcoming, and El is a power. And that Christ would act so when he became man was foretold by the mystery of Jacob's wrestling with him, who appeared to him in that he ministered to the Father, the will of the Father, yet nevertheless is God, in that he is the first begotten of all creatures. So why is he God? Because he's the first begotten of God, even though he calls him a creature. First begotten of all creatures. Okay?
And so he's a first begotten, so he's a creation, period. And from God, from the Father. So yeah, he's subordinate to it. So it's not 100% co-equal. It's just part of it. On it. And I like how I said when he wrestles with, again, calling him an angel, saying that was Jesus the one that Jacob was wrestling, in the Old Testament, an angel that they already seen just a regular angel, but now they're saying no, that's actually it was Jesus.
Now here we go for a little bit further, chapter 127. These and other such sayings are recorded by the lawgiver and by the prophets, and I suppose that I have stated sufficiently that wherever God says God went up from Abraham, Genesis 18:22, or the Lord spoke to Moses, Exodus 6:29, And the Lord came down to behold the tower which the sons of men had built, Genesis 11:5. Or when God shut Noah into the ark, Genesis 7:16. You must not imagine that the unbegotten God himself came down or went up from any place. Now, this is very interesting, and I'm actually going to relate it to Islamic theology in just a second. Did not come down from any or went up from any place. For the ineffable Father, remember that term ineffable, that he leaves solely for the Father, and the Lord of all neither has come to any place, nor walks, nor sleeps, nor rises up, but remains in his own place, wherever that is, quick to behold and quick to hear, having neither eyes nor ears, but being of indescribable might. And he sees all things and knows all things, and none of us escapes his observation. And he is not moved or confined to a spot in the world, for he existed before the world was made. So he's very, again, reminiscent of that passage when he says, even the person of the smallest intelligence will not say that God, the maker of all, was visible on a little portion of earth. Now, why does he say that that can't be? Why? Because the Father doesn't come down to any place, meaning enter into creation, right? But remains in his own place wherever that may be, right? Which, not to get too much into the dispute between different schools of Islamic theology, but that's a position that is held amongst the Athari's or Hanabila, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above creation, is completely outside of creation. He's not entering into creation, but nevertheless, we don't say that he's nowhere, so to speak. He doesn't exist anywhere. So Justin Martyr is representing a similar view, at least in that minimal context. And he's saying that the Father can't come or enter into creation. Why? Because he's in his own place and he can't enter into creation. So that's why the Son. But if the Son is of the same divine nature as the Father, then how could he be said to be able to do that, but the Father can't? So this is why, as I said, when you go back to that passage in chapter 56 and chapter 60 of another God, you cannot interpret it as merely another divine person, because why does the God the Father have these attributes of ineffability, unbegottenness, all of these other things, that he's in a place, but he can't go down into creation? Why does he have all of these descriptions and the Son is able to do them? If they have the same divine nature, then it wouldn't make any sense. Okay.
It almost alludes that you have to keep a modalist view and then twist it into what it is now, because that's the only way it contradicts each other. And yeah, that description right there, it's description why Jesus can't be God. It's plain and simple. But it doesn't make sense.
So then further on in the same text, he again asserts the same thing. How then could he talk with anyone or be seen by anyone or appear on the smallest portion of earth, when the people at Sinai were not able to even look on the glory of him who was sent from him? Well, if it's the same glory, then theoretically, Trifle could have said, oh, well, they're the same. So of course the Father could have done it. No, it's not. They couldn't. He's saying, look, the Jews at that time could not even stand looking at the glory of this other God that was sent by the Most High God. You think they can deal with looking at the Most High God? By greater reason, they can't deal with that. That's what he's saying. When the people at Sinai were not able to even look on the glory of him who was sent from him, and Moses himself could not enter into the tabernacle which he had erected, when it was filled with the glory of God, and the priest could not endure to stand before the temple when Solomon conveyed the ark into the house in Jerusalem, which he had built for it. Therefore, neither Abraham, nor Isaac, nor Jacob, nor any other man saw the Father and ineffable Lord of all, and also of Christ, but saw him who was according to his will, his Son, being God, and the angel, because he ministers to his will, whom also it pleased him to be born man by the Virgin, who also was fire when he conversed with Moses from the bush. Since unless we thus comprehend the scriptures, it must follow that the Father and Lord of all had not been in heaven. Wow, look at that. What he's saying is, look, if you don't understand this text of scripture my way, then that would entail that the Father was on the smallest portion of earth, seen by Moses and Abraham, and so on and so forth. But if he was there, that means that he wouldn't be in heaven. Going back to the earth, what it said earlier, that he's in his own place, wherever it may be.
Yeah, it's almost like both places can't coincide at the same time. So he will have to leave that place to be on the other plane, talk to Moses on it. So it come almost like it needs to. So it could explain this triunity type deal. It's crazy,
right? So that's why he's saying if he can't be appearing on the smallest portion of earth, we know he's in heaven or above the heavens, right? So here, going further, this is chapter 128. He says, I know that some wish to anticipate these remarks and to say that the power sent from the Father of all, which appeared to Moses or to Abraham or to Jacob, is called an angel. So this is Trypho now trying to anticipate an argument. It's called an angel because he came to men, for by him the commands of the Father have been proclaimed to men. It's called glory because he appears in a vision sometimes that cannot be borne. It's called a man and a human being because he appears arrayed in such forms as the Father pleases. And they call him the Word because he carries tidings from the Father to men. But maintain that this power is indivisible and inseparable from the Father. So this is a really important text because actually some Christian apologists have used this and totally misunderstood what Justin is saying here. It's actually the reverse of what he's saying. Justin is saying that I know some people who will anticipate this remarks. So whatever he's about to say, he doesn't agree with it. What he's describing there is basically a modalistic type of view where the person would say, well, yeah, he's called an angel or he's called a man and he's called these things because he appears in this form. So it's almost as if God created these forms by the Father's pleasure by which you see all these appearances, right? But, and also about these same people, they maintain that this power, meaning these appearances or whatever, is indivisible and inseparable from the Father. Well, hold on a second. Isn't that what Trinitarians believe? Trinitarians believe, as well as modalists, that this power or the Son is indivisible and inseparable from that. And he says, just as they say that the light of the sun on earth is indivisible and inseparable from the sun in the heavens. Now, Brother Bassam, have you heard this analogy before where sometimes Trinitarian Christians have used the sun and the sun, S-U-N, is like the Father, and then you have, the rays and the light coming down. Yeah. And so he's using this analogy to say, they use this analogy to say that this power is indivisible and inseparable from the Father. And in reality, that analogy results in a kind of modalism. But nevertheless, he says that
yeah, I mean the rays. Well, it's see the same concept of the car with the engine and tires. It's like a modalism where it's just, or not more like most, but it's like they're pieces of God, but the rays, that's a byproduct of the sun and is sent. So they don't come into existence until a certain point. So it's not still not one with the sun. Like the sun rays are not one with the sun. Sun rays just come forth after the sun.
That the light of the sun of earth is indivisible and inseparable from, they say that the light of the sun on earth is indivisible and inseparable from the sun in the heavens. As when it sinks, the light sinks all along with it. So the Father, when he chooses, say they, causes his power to spring forth, and when he chooses, he makes it return to himself. Now he says, in this way they teach he made the angels, but it is proved that there are angels who always exist. Now, I'm not going to get into that dispute. Seems like he's saying there are angels that are eternal. That's a whole nother thing. And are never reduced to that form out of which they sprang. And that this power, which the prophetic word calls God, as has been also amply demonstrated, and angel, is not numbered as different in name only, like the light of the sun. Remember, I said it kind of references modalism, where the Father and Son are different only, and he's saying, notice the indivisibility aspect. They're only distinct in terms of name or mode. Is not as different in name only, like the light of the sun, but is indeed something numerically distinct. So he's refuting that idea and saying, no, it's not like that. They're indeed numerically distinct. I have discussed briefly in what has gone before when I asserted that this power was begotten from the Father by his power and will. Again, begotten by his power and will, but not by abscission, as if the essence of the Father were divided, as all other things partitioned and divided are not the same after as before they were divided. And for the sake of example, I took the case of fires kindled from a fire. So now this is his analogy, which we see to be distinct from it, and yet that from which many can be kindled is by no means made less, but remains the same. Now this is
it's God is the fire, and then Jesus is more like you buy a stick, you put in the fire, there's fire there, the fire can still, and then you know, it's almost the same. There's fire, but there's just one eternal fire, and there's one that needed the Father to start, so to speak. Yeah, I've heard about that. Which is modalism. It's a heresy.
a lot, but why is this important? Two things. It's showing that Justin believes that the Father and Son are not inseparable and indivisible. He's arguing that some people say that and use the analogy of light and sun, but he says no. The Son is not merely distinct from the Father in terms of mode or name. He's numerically distinct. And then he gives the analogy of a fire kindling another fire, and he says you can see that they are distinct, meaning they're separated. It's like if I have two torches, I take one that's lit and light the other one, and he's saying, now here's the second part of it. Why is this important? Because some Christian apologists use this to say, look, Justin is saying that the Father and Son have the same essence. And they're undivided. That's not what he's saying. That's exact opposite. He's arguing against the view that they're inseparable and indivisible. And what he's doing with his example is, because he believes God is utterly timeless and changeless, etc., there was a concern about how could he be the cause of the sun and yet remain the same. So he gives the example of a fire kindling another torch, or getting another fire started, and yet that same fire remains the same. Now, whether or not that example works, I don't think so, because when you imagine it in your head, it seems like still a temporal process. But nevertheless, regardless, that's what his analogy is meant to show. So when he says not by abscission, he means that it's not like a piece of the Father breaks off and becomes something outside of himself. It's like one fire starting another torch, okay, another kindling another fire, okay. So they have misunderstood that and said, oh no, he means that they have the same nature undivided. He's arguing the exact opposite.
It seems like he's mainly stressing that that nothing changed in the essence of the Father as a result of this generation process. That seems to be the main point that he's trying to stress here. But
exactly,
it seems like with his remark on numerically distinct, that makes sense on him talking about other gods, right?
Exactly.
So it seems
exactly. So here we go to chapter 129. So he says, as he is Father and God, the cause of his power and of his being Lord and God. He's the cause of his power and of his being Lord and God. The Lord created me, the beginning of his ways for his works. Remember, that's the Proverbs chapter 8 text. From everlasting, he established me in the beginning, before he formed the earth, and before he made the depths, and before the springs of waters came forth, before the mountains were settled. He begets me before all the hills. Okay. It's basically, Justin has this understanding that, and some have argued that this is what the Gospel of John in chapter 1 is saying. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then it says, and it became flesh and dwelt amongst us. That even if you push it back to that, that doesn't necessarily prove his absolute co-equal and co-eternal status of the Word or the Son, because it could be referring to something like this, where Justin doesn't believe that the Son is co-equal and co-eternal with the Father. He believes that he's created as the first created being, or begotten as the first being, right before the rest of creation, and then he's the being by which the Father creates the rest of creation, because he's, has this Platonic scheme that he can't directly interact with creation. Okay, so that's what Justin's definitely saying, and some have argued that that's what, if you wanted to push it to its furthest extent, that's how far you could push Gospel of John chapter 1, but not even to get co-eternality there. Now, to show that this is not just Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, saying this, I'm going to show actual genuine scholarship is saying the exact same thing. And I want to emphasize this. These are actually practicing Trinitarian Christians, okay? And they're experts in their field, okay? For example, Dennis Mins, and I just briefly put a sentence or two about their bio, because I want people to understand I'm not quoting just random, scholarship or fringe scholarship. I'm not quoting, what's that guy's name? I'm not quoting Robert Price here, okay? who argues that Jesus never existed, or some very strange minority opinion. I'm not arguing that. Dennis Mins, no disrespect to Robert Price, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Dennis Mins is a Dominican Catholic monk. Okay, so he's a Trinitarian Christian Catholic monk. He was a member of the theology faculty of Oxford University. Paul would like that. And lecturer for Blackfriars in patristics. So his expertise is in patristics. Okay, that means a scholar of the church fathers, which Justin Martyr is. By the way, he has an entire text where he has a translation and commentary on Justin Martyr's first and second apologies, which we went through earlier. Now, Paul Parvis, who is also co-author of the same text, is likewise a Dominican Catholic British patristic scholar and lecturer in patristics at the University of Edinburgh. Okay, so I mean, these guys are, very high in the field. In fact, I mean, might be good for Paul to reach out to them and see if he can invite them on. That would be interesting, to see if I accurately represent them and to get more information from these guys. Now, in that text that I referenced, which they translate Justin Martyr's text and have a commentary on it, they say this in the introduction to the translation. Justin believed that the very possibility of divine revelation required the existence of such a distinct, subordinated, or second-order divinity for the possibility of God directly and immediately communicating himself to anyone else was ruled out by God's own transcendence. Remember that Platonic idea I was mentioning. He is aware, however, that to speak of this rational power as another God distinct from the Father who begets him is problematical for the belief that God is one. Justin solves the difficulty.
Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome. We're actually starting to wrap up. It's getting really interesting right now. Actually, he is extremely heretical compared to now. That is completely okay. You go do your shopping, it's completely fine on there. It pretty much just kind of shows how far off he is from what the teachings of the church is now on there. And even now, of course, some scholars who could tell that yes, he was definitely not like what we would perceive as being a Trinitarian. He definitely believes Jesus as essence, has some essence of, or something comes from, and he's a created being from at least at the beginning from creation, not eternal. So it's definitely, I mean, it's all heresy now, but it's quite fascinating how the Trinitarian formula has completely turned into what it is now.
To his own satisfaction, hinting at that he doesn't think it's satisfactory he did it, by insisting that the other God and Lord, who is beside the maker of the universe, came into being by the will of the Father, and though numerically distinct from him, has never done anything except that which the God, who is the maker of all, above whom there is no other God, has willed him to do and to say. Now notice it's referencing all the texts I just went through, okay? The idea that God deals with the created order by means of a second God had contemporary parallels in Jewish exegesis and in Greek philosophy. The existence of quote unquote two powers in heaven. I'm sure you've heard of this idea. Many Christians use this as an apologetic. Not all, to be fair, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, was thought by some Jewish exegetes to be shown by some passages of scripture. So very clearly, I mean, you tell me, Brother Bassam, it seems like Mins and Parvis are agreeing exactly what I just said. I mean, and this is an Oxford text, you know, so this is not like some random publication. Now, just in case you said, oh, just in case you're Orthodox and you said, oh, it's those Catholics, man, you know, Pope Francis.
No, yeah, it's and yeah, no, you could show all this to the Christians on there. Even, I mean, we're talking about Dominican monks and the priests who studied the church fathers. They'll say, yeah, they believed, he definitely believed in more multiple gods. He believed there were two gods. But saying, oh no, that's mainly how supposedly the plural of the Old Testament, which not a single Jewish rabbi will ever say no, that there's no such thing as more than one God. He is one. Like they believe the same as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, same as Muslims, there's just only one, nothing else on there. The plural we has always been seen as a majestic plural on there. It's like no. But they try to grab hold to that, say no, that is somehow biblical, and it's not. He's definitely talking about polytheism.
Everything going on with Pope Francis, they've liberalized, you know, we don't, okay, don't worry. We got John Baer here, Orthodox theologian, just again to show you he's an expert in the field. He's the former dean of St. Vladimir's Orthodox Theological Seminary here in the U.S.
And Pope Francis made a video. It's going to come out, I think, tomorrow. I think it's like he's opening the doors to a lot of things. I wouldn't be surprised within my lifetime if I see a priest in the Catholic Church wearing a rainbow suit. That's just my belief. I think in my lifetime I'm going to see it. It's opening the doors to a lot of things. But there's some controversy though. He might be backpedaling like, oops, no, I'm supposed to not believe in that. So who knows?
U.S., where he was the director of the Master of Theology program and the Father George Florowski Distinguished Professor of Patristics. Again, his specialty is in patristics. John Baer, in his Formation of Christian Theology, Volume 2, Volume 1, the Way to Nicaea, he says this, and I quote, "As it is not God himself who thus appeared and spoke with man, the word of God who did all of these things is for Justin, quote, another God and Lord besides the maker of all. who is also called his angel, as he brings messages from the maker of all, above whom there is no other God. The divinity of Jesus Christ, another God, is no longer that of the Father himself, but subordinate to it, a lesser divinity. Although Justin speaks in the traditional manner of Jesus Christ as the Word, revealing God, he shares the common philosophical presupposition of his day that as God is so totally transcendent to created reality, he needs an intermediary, his Word, to act for him and to mediate between himself and creation. So that's self-explanatory. I don't even need to explain it. He's completely agreeing with and quoting the exact same. So notice he's not just agreeing with me, he's agreeing with me on the basis of the very same text that I was quoting. Now, let's say you weren't happy with that. Oh, John Baer, he's Orthodox. You don't like the Catholics either. Okay, we'll throw in a Jewish scholar here for a bonus. Now, this is Daniel Boyarin, who is a Jewish scholar who specializes in the relationship between Judaism and early Christianity. And remember that two powers of heaven thing that Dennis Mims mentioned. That's his basically area of expertise. So Daniel Boyarin, he has an article called Two Powers in Heaven, or The Making of a Heresy. And again, I recommend people read these things. Check me out. Check out the sources. He says this, and I quote, "Many of these very passages served as the origin and proof text for Logos theology." He's talking about the Hebrew Bible. "As manifested in Justin Martyr's dialogue on nearly every page." So what is he saying? He's saying Logos theology is manifested on Justin Martyr's dialogue on every page. So he's calling him a Logos theologian. Now look at this. Nicene Orthodoxy also effectively crucifies the Logos, while not ceasing to speak of the Logos, in the move to a Trinitarian theology within which the entire Trinity is both self-contained and fully transcendent. Athanasius and his fellows insist that God alone, without a mediator, without an angel, without a Logos, is the creator. Logos theology is ultimately as thoroughly rejected within Nicene Christianity as within Orthodox rabbinism. Now, wow, let's focus on this. If Justin Martyr, as I've attempted to prove, and I think without a shadow of a doubt, I mean, people can judge for themselves, was a proponent of Logos theology, as we've explained and understood his teachings, Daniel Boyarin, who's an expert in this topic, says Logos theology is ultimately as thoroughly rejected within Nicene Christianity as within Orthodox rabbinism. Basically, it's considered a heresy. Okay? So I think that's very clear. Now, to be fair to the other side, you say, okay, Jake, you did a long presentation on Justin Martyr, explaining all these texts and these scholars agreeing with you. What about the other side? What do they say? Let's try to steel man them. Let's give them the best possible argument, what they could go to. Okay, a Trinitarian might say, Justin calls the Son God. Well, certainly he does. I mean, who can dispute that? He certainly calls him God. An example is Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 34.
But not a co-equal God. Calling God, it's definitely not a co-equal God. I mean, the co-Hercules God, but not Zeus God.
And when it has been said, O God, give your judgment to the king, since Solomon was king, you say that the psalm refers to him, although the words of the psalm expressly proclaim that reference is made to the everlasting king, i.e. to Christ, for Christ is king and priest and God and Lord and angel and man and captain and stone, and a son born and first made subject to suffering, then returning to heaven and again coming with glory, and he is priest just having the everlasting kingdom. Wow. So what do we have here? We have Justin Martyr saying that Jesus is God, that he's an everlasting king. What does that mean? Is he eternal? And he's preached as having the everlasting kingdom. So before I answer, let me just go further to give their strongest interpretation. So Justin calls the Son God, and maybe says the Son is eternal, right? Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 96, who do not know that this is he who existed before all, who is the eternal priest of God and King and Christ. Wow, so does he believe that he's eternal in the past? Maybe. Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 113. For the latter is he after whom and by whom the Father will renew both the heaven and the earth. This is he who shall shine an eternal light in Jerusalem. This is he who is the king of Salem after the order of Melchizedek and the eternal priest of the Most High. Wow, so it's calling him eternal king, eternal priest. He's God. So what do you mean, Jake? Isn't he the Most High God? Well, if, first of all, let's say, even if that were true, at most you could say Justin's contradicting himself, which, I mean, most people don't want to get to that on that large of a scale of contradiction and in that many texts. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is, first of all, as I said, we have to understand the term God, not based on our modern 21st century context, based on Justin's 2nd century coming from a polytheistic pagan background of what the term God means. Okay, God was a term that could be used for multiple beings, not only the Most High God. Now, as Muslims, we don't accept this. This is repudiated in the Quran without a shadow of a doubt. So I'm not supporting this. But I'm saying in the Bible, you have Moses who's called Elohim. You have different figures that are clearly not the Most High are called God. So the term God has to be understood based on the context of the author and the time in which he's writing. So just saying that Justin Martyr called the Son God is not sufficient to prove that he was an Orthodox Trinitarian. Likewise, this claim where it says eternal or everlasting, in context, it's very clear, as you can see from the final text, chapter 113, that it's talking about him being an eternal priest of the order of Melchizedek, meaning eternal in the future, not in terms of him having an eternal existence back in the past. Okay. Now, that's basically two arguments here. And this is, I think, let me just make sure. Yeah, this is the last argument, I think, that I would give from the so-called pro-Orthodox side of what they would want to say. So you have him being called God, you have him being called eternal in some sense. Now you also have him worshipped. We talked a lot about that before, but let's go over some text. First Apology, chapter 16, he says, and that we ought to worship God alone. He thus persuaded us, the greatest commandment is, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve with all your heart and with all your strength, the Lord God that made you. Mark 12:30. This is a very famous passage from Jesus. And when a certain man came to him and said, good master, he answered and said, there is none good but God only, who made all things. Matthew 19:6 and 17. Now, so what apologists want to use with this text is they say, okay, in this text, he's clearly saying, and quoting Jesus' own words from Mark 12, that Jesus said you only worship God alone. Then he's going to try to show that worship is given to the Son. Therefore, the entailment is that the Son must be God, right? That's the basic argument. So in chapter 31, talking about the Daniel 7 vision, says, I saw in the vision of the night, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. And he came to the Ancient of Days and stood before him. And they who stood by brought him near. And there were given him power and kingly honor, and all nations of the earth by their families and all glory serve him. And his dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not be taken away, and his kingdom shall not be destroyed. Now, I want to say at the outset that there's a discrepancy in the original text of Daniel chapter 7. There's a Greek word, I'm not an expert in Greek, so please forgive my pronunciation, but there's a Greek word called latruo, which is typically used usually as understanding worship that is only for the one and only true Most High God. That's usually how it's understood. However, in Daniel chapter 7, whether you think this is talking about the Son of Man or some Jewish interpreters think it's talking about the saints or whatever, whoever you think it's about, in the Greek Septuagint version of the Old Testament, there are some versions that use the word latruo there, okay? But there's a variant in the text transmission of the Septuagint there. Now, Justin Martyr appears to be quoting that, and he does use the word latruo in this text. So some people would say, well, look, Jake, latruo is divine worship of a certain special type. That therefore means that when Jesus said you should only worship God, if Justin had no problem quoting this passage from Daniel 7 and worship is being made here to the Son of Man, then that must mean that he must believe that he's the Most High God. That's the argument. Now, the question here that I have is, in the context, the power possessed by the Son of Man, first of all, is given to him. Does God receive power from another? No, of course not. So even the type of power that is being mentioned in Daniel 7, or the power and kingly honor or everlasting dominion, it's given to him by the Ancient of Days. He doesn't have it in and of himself. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, from the previous text of chapter 16 of the first apology, in that very same text where he's mentioning worship only one God, he also mentions the text of Matthew 19, which says, and when a certain man came to him and said, good master, he answered and said, there is none good but God only, who made all things. Now remember, for Justin, he always uses the maker of all things and God somewhat synonymously and distinct from the Son. So why would he be quoting that text there? Is also quoting that text is also showing that the Son is not the Most High God, because he can't take on the name of being called good. Only God is good, the one who made all things, who for Justin is the Father alone. So when you look at all of this in context, and in context of with everything else I presented, it's not a strong enough argument to bring one text where latruo is being applied to the Son from a passage in Daniel chapter 7, which has a variant in the Septuagint, and which from the Jewish perspective is applied to traditionally to the sons of the Most High, to the saints, basically, right? To the Jewish saints. And if that's the case, well, the Jews don't believe that the Son, those people, those beings get the same worship as the Father. So you're reading too much into a single word that is being used here. Likewise, as I said, from the context of Daniel chapter 7 and in chapter 31, as Justin quotes it, the power and kingly honor and service and everlasting dominion is given to him, right? It's given to him by the Ancient of Days or the Father, how if you interpret it that way. He doesn't have it in and of himself. So even that would be a subordinated role. Now, let me quote here. It says, and I beheld, this is further from, I think, Daniel 7 and Justin chapter 31, and I beheld that horn waging war against the saints and prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came, and he gave judgment for the saints of the Most High. And the time came, and the saints of the Most High possessed the kingdom. So that this is in the same Daniel chapter 7. That's why many Jews interpret it as the Son of Man is referring to the saints of the Most High, because later on in the same chapter, it seems to directly equate the saints of the Most High with the ones that have the kingdom. And he shall speak words against the Most High, and shall overthrow the rest of the saints of the Most High, and shall expect to change the seasons and the times, and it shall be delivered into his hands for a time, and times, and half a time. And the judgment sat, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and the power and the great places of the kingdoms under the heaven were given to the holy people of the Most High, to reign in an everlasting kingdom, and all powers shall be subject to him and shall obey him. So it seems like very clearly in Daniel 7 and what Justin quotes in chapter 31, that the Son of Man figure is actually not even this Messiah type figure. I know this is debated, but not even this Messiah type figure. It's actually referring to the saints of the Most High, and again reiterating that this is only given to him, and it's only for a time that it's given to him, and that the powers, all powers, are subject to him. So it's still a derivative power that is being given here. Let's see. Now I want to give two other.
I'm gonna leave it right here. Actually, it's almost done on there. I'm going on for over an hour now, and sadly, I must get ready to go to work. But yeah, this is extremely. I mean, alhamdulillah for our brother Jake. How he just so much information, such a wealth of information here on there. I'll continue on, and yeah, I'll continue on. It will finish him and then go on the other fathers, and then until we finish this video, make it this a week long, kind of like small streams to kind of break down the video, comment a little bit about it, and bring this information to the light. It's definitely something different, especially the way what they church says they believe in the Trinity, what they did before, and how it came about. It's good information to have and to know, and to see how pretty much the evolution of paganism in the church. But let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment out there, and thank you guys, everybody from the chat, Cobb FF channel, Junior Smart, Psycore. Thank you guys for showing up, showing your support. Hope you guys get something out of this, and you guys enjoy it as well. So until next time, assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and have a wonderful day.